As the sky brightened, Diem wielded the Hong-Long sword, surveying the peaks of Madan, while the militia troops gathered at the foot of the mountain. The first battle cry resounded, and the entire army surged into battle in the blink of an eye. The Ming and Japanese troops clashed, and the system notification of enhanced combat capabilities echoed. The speed of attack and defense increases with the number of troops. Enemy elimination increases by 50%. Offensive capability increases by 50% when facing a high-ranking opponent. Shock initiation increases by 150% with a force of over 500 people. Offensive and defensive power increases by 150% when defending on the battlefield. The battlefield was vast and hellish, with the smell of blood permeating everywhere. Diem wielded the Hong-Long sword and charged into battle, his sword slicing through enemy soldiers' throats. The system notification unlocked his assassination mission skills. The Hong-Long sword, stained with blood, remained as sharp as ever, while the murderous aura enveloped Diem, making him seem like a demonic entity harvesting lives. Suddenly, a black flash flew straight towards him. Diem swiftly avoided the fatal blow. A Japanese warrior wielding a black armored sword looked coldly at Diem. The system notified. Name: Coto Kayoshi, General of Qinquak. Status: Lord of the Qi Feng Mukai. Expertise: Swordsmanship 89%. Skills: Proficient in using various sword-type weapons. Sharpness increased by 30%. Mukai strength increased by 100%. Divine skin bestowed by Kanishi Yukinaga, providing protection from demonic power. 10% damage reduction. 25% damage reduction from Diem Phu's actions. Viewing the most accurate intelligence data, Diem knew this was a formidable opponent. He began to rush towards Diem. Diem raised his sword to dodge Koto's attack. Then, he countered with a fierce strike. Diem wielded Hong-Long to withstand the force, causing his arm to go numb and collapse onto a straw cushion. He swiftly advanced, delivering 2 consecutive strikes. Hong-Long clashed against Koto's sword, creating a burst of air that blew away surrounding warriors. Diem couldn't resist, stepping back to create some distance. A nearby Japanese soldier took advantage of the opportunity, thrusting his long sword straight into Diem's chest. Diem placed Hong-Long on the sword's blade, gently turning it, causing blood to spray. At that moment, Koto's attack came flying. Diem spat blood onto Hong-Long, blocking the sword's blade. Blood dripped onto Koto's neck. Diem retreated, then lunged forward with terrifying speed. Koto was surprised by Diem's agility, only managing to use the sword's handle to strike Diem's shoulder. Koto's abdomen froze as he felt the pain in his shoulder. Diem cursed and pulled Hong-Long out. He knew the sword only pierced the armor on Koto's ribs, causing no significant harm. Since the battle began, Koto had only used one weapon, his sword. However, Koto's speed was extremely fast, making it difficult to defend against. Thinking so, Diem decided on a plan. He turned, jumped a few steps, then ran towards the chaotic battlefield. Koto saw Diem darting away, realizing he couldn't match his speed. He grabbed a nearby Japanese soldier and threw him towards Diem. Diem halted, sensing something flying towards him. He leaped, rolling once, then pulled Hong-Long from the ground. Grabbing a long spear nearby, he aimed straight at Koto. Koto remained silent, his eyes filled with murderous intent as he swung his sword towards Diem. Diem thrust his spear directly into Koto's sword. The sound of metal clashing echoed. The force pushed the sword aside, and Diem let out a loud shout, sweeping his spear horizontally at Koto's head. Koto jerked back, pressing his sword down to avoid the blow. Then Diem leaped forward, thrusting straight at Koto. Unable to react in time, Koto could only watch as the spear pierced through his chest. While Diem was battling Koto atop Madan Peak, at the gates of Bin Hong Fortress, cannons and flamethrowers continuously fired. Black smoke billowed, and red flames spread across the walls. The sound of explosions reverberated, cries of pain and death filled the air. At the sound of the horn, siege machines rushed towards the fortress gates. The Ming army hurled square boxes, igniting explosives that launched hundreds of flaming arrows, piercing through the ranks of Japanese soldiers on the walls. They fell like rain, while the red flag fluttered amidst the dust of battle. Gradually, the whole world seemed to be engulfed in flames. The brutal attack began, but little did they know, after the battle miles away, there would be no one to collect the white bones. Each household, clad in mourning clothes, wept beneath the fortress walls. Just now, Diem had thrust his spear straight through Koto's chest, causing Koto to continuously retreat, blood flowing incessantly from his chest. Diem swung his spear again, infuriating Koto, who roared and swung his sword back. The blades clashed, sparking flames. The two engaged in a fierce battle like a raging storm, exchanging more than 10 strikes in an instant. Diem's methods were ruthless, exploiting every blow for a fatal opportunity. When Koto failed to defend, Diem thrust straight into Koto's throat, causing a chunk of flesh to be cut off. Taking advantage of the moment, Koto forcefully struck, breaking Diem's spear. The spearhead embedded into the ground. Diem held half of the broken spear, staring intently at Koto. Blood oozed from the corner of Koto's mouth, with a horrifying wound on his neck. At this moment, Koto was severely injured, his eyes filled with madness and a wild thirst for blood. Suddenly, Koto's entire body spurted blood, collapsing to the ground dead. The system announced that the critical point of hemorrhage had been reached, triggering a sudden surge in damage. This attack increased by another 2%. The state of suspension lost its effectiveness. 21 hours after witnessing their general's death, the Japanese soldiers began to panic. One soldier shouted, "The general is dead." "Koto, the general, is dead." Before he could finish, Koto's deputy beheaded him. His eyes turned red as he roared, "Koto, the general, has fallen." The deputy general of Koto issued the order to retreat to the designated position. Ngo Dai Trum spoke coldly, "We'll rely on the dangerous terrain to resist. Kill the flies and surround Modon Peak." Meanwhile, at the crumbling gates of Bin Hong Fortress, Tongyi wielded his staff, leading the group of soldiers to charge towards the residence of Kanishi Yukinada. Suddenly, Tongyi halted, his eyes fixed ahead in the swirling mist and black smoke. A monstrous creature approached, and the archers immediately took aim and fired. Tongyi muttered quietly, "It's not the first time encountering such terror." A gust of wind blew, dispersing the smoke, revealing the entire street, filled with bloated demon corpses, the Chi soldiers' bodies scattered like those in hell. Suddenly, a charging demon knocked down a soldier who couldn't evade in time, resulting in a blood explosion. Tongyi looked coldly at the troops behind him, his face discontented. "You're all worthless," he said. Meanwhile, inside Bin Hong Fortress, Kanishi Yukinada looked weary as he gazed at Kuroda opposite him, asking how long these monsters could hold back the Ming army. Kuroda replied, "It depends on the Ming army's determination. Damon has come prepared with flamethrowers and cannons, even with generals. So, a demon within Shinjidai Fortress is no match for the Ming army. It could last about a day." Kanishi Yukinaga hesitated, unsure what to do. Kuroda continued, "So, consider this your final effort before fleeing. If that person dares to enter Shinjidai Fortress, we'll kill him. I like Miyoko, Kanishi. If we can return, I'll give her to you." Although the Daemon army had taken Bin Hong Fortress, Kanishi Yukinada still held out in the bunkers, resisting fiercely. However, after transitioning to battle within the fortress, Daemon's artillery lost its advantage, while Japanese flamethrowers and cannons proved effective. The situation was at a stalemate. Lin Hutong requested the High Monk to use magic to exterminate the demons, but was rejected. The High Monk stated that the principle of a monk was to save lives and couldn't engage in frontline killing. Seeing his senior monk sitting beside him, Dick Kaokong said, "Senior brother, are you afraid?" Dick Kaokong blushed and hastily covered his mouth, saying, "It's not fear. How could a Taoist be afraid of demons?" Tongdung Swang's face darkened. "Let's find another way, master. We don't need to enter the fortress." Realizing his lack of thoughtfulness, the master quickly said, "Stand by my side. Prepare the magical artifacts for the generals to use. Besides, there are 1,000 Kim Kang talismans, 1,000 Ban Sun talismans, and 3,000 Fa Tat talismans to continuously march with the army. The obstructing key will make them feel very uncomfortable. After the discussion, the generals decided to retreat. In the tent of the Ming army, rewards were being distributed. Lak Duongchai, the first to climb the walls, received 5,000 silver coins. Tongki, who commanded the front line and killed the Japanese general Coto Kayoshi, received 2,000 silver coins. Diem thanked the person delivering the silver coins and casually mentioned, "By the way, Lai Tongki, guests have arrived." Lak Tuomchi praised Diem's sharp tactics, turning into a dragon prince. Diem remained silent, feeling the presence of Tongki, knowing he was not simple. That night, Diem went alone to an empty plot outside the fortress to analyze the situation. After this fierce battle, he and his subordinates had suffered considerable losses. Many generals recognized Lai Tongki's contributions, especially his bold strategy in ambushing Coto Kayoshi, the Japanese general, especially among the military ranks. In total, he earned 20 gold ducats, each providing 25 points and 500 points of Diem Phu. Additionally, he unlocked the skill, Killing Like Crazy, a passive skill that would intimidate the enemy with a certain number of aggressive aura releases, threatening them for half a second to 2 seconds. This was also a prerequisite for unlocking the martial inheritance. With just one powerful Diem Phu item, he would have a clue to unlock the martial inheritance, like a gesture of gratitude for a meal, repaying debts, and settling grievances. Such traits as enjoying fighting and being competitive were often carved into the warrior's character. The battlefield was the most suitable place to obtain this type of Diem Phu artifact. Suddenly, the system announced, "You have killed a major general of the Qin Kwok era, officially unlocking this Diem Phu event. You have killed the commanding officer Kanishi, the head of the 1st Army Division of Shinjitai. The Ming Army will be stationed at the Daong River to intercept and defeat the retreating enemy from Shinjitai. This is your only chance. The content of this event has exceeded the limits of wandering ability. You can choose to abandon the Diem Phu event and be free to act for 1 month. After abandoning, deduct 30% of shopping limits and evaluation through the screen, but you won't lose points and items obtained in this event." Diem didn't hesitate any longer and chose to accept the system's offer, receiving this Diem Phu event. The system then started to evaluate this Diem Phu event, which seemed to have some errors. Compensation would be provided for the traveler if such errors were found. Diem would receive a level 10 assistance and an additional $10 in funds. At that moment, Diem's eyes sparkled, and black electric currents emanated from his pupils, forming a deep black hole that gradually separated from his eye. The system continued to announce, and just as the hole was wide enough for half a person, it stated that the Du Kong Jia, additional assistants, had a beneficial relationship with the traveler. They would cooperate in combat, and the basic attribute categories would increase by 30%. For the inheritor, they could provide additional attribute enhancements compatible with accounting. But if one of the Du Kong Jia died, the other Du Kong Jia would inherit all their attributes, but their level of enlightenment would decrease by 10%. Additionally, 5,000 Diem Phu points would be deducted. Suddenly, a small white hand was placed on his shoulder, and a deep voice said, "Sorry, please let me through." The young man turned around to see Thaitu appearing behind him. Without hesitation, Diem accepted the system's proposal. Thaitu slowly spoke, "Nam Diem Phu suggests that over 100 travelers are born every year. But ultimately, only half of them can survive 6 Diem Phu events. This time, the suffering exceeded 10%, similar to the miserable fake who was almost killed by threats, but chose to drift like that because he couldn't bring himself to kill any travelers." Thaitu wiped his mouth and said, "I will help you reach a higher threshold." Under the withered tree, Diem and Thaitu sat facing each other, with the companion from earlier now silent. Diem asked casually, "Your injuries don't seem light, do they?" Thaitu chuckled, "That fat guy fell down, so I owe him all my gratitude. Next time I meet him, I'll repay everything." Diem casually inquired about the level of a $10 one, but in reality, he was observing Thaitu, who was now twice as strong as himself. After Thaitu finished answering, he stood up and approached Diem. "Have you made up your mind whether to attack or endure?" Lydium remained silent, drawing his hone-long sword. He swung it upwards, deflecting an arrow aimed at Thaitu. The warhorse neighed as over 100 cavalrymen surrounded Thaitu and Lydium. Thaitu's hand gripped Lydium's shoulder as he stepped over him. "Sorry, could you please step aside?" The young man turned back, only to see Thaitu behind him. Dang Thien hung. Ladi Yu and other generals. They all held bows and arrows aimed at Thaitu. Unsympathetic eyes. Lydium coldly shouted back, then looked at Thaitu with bloody hands and asked, "Is Hong Kwai dead?" Thaitu had a gloomy face and said nothing. Lydium told Hong Long that he wanted her to help him with something. Thaitu glanced at Tay's jacket. "Say that frankly. First of all, we have to think about how to explain her background." Thaitu swings her long hair through his coat over his shoulder and walked into the 5th Ming Army. Thaitu glanced at Dang Thien Hung. Majestic. Look at Lydium camp. There were only 2 people at Kokong's tent. Kokong looked at Lydium bewilderedly and asked why he came here. After Lydium confirmed, Dick Kokong shook his head. "General, you should find Marshal Lin Hutung or Tongung Suang. We can't decide." Lydium secretly thought Tongung Suang was a civil servant. As for Lin Hutung, he has been fighting for many years. Both combined are not as good as you, he immediately flattered. Marshal and important Tongung Suang. But the lower official thought, "This requires Dick Kokong's approval," just succeeded. Dick Kokong was satisfied but still maintained his attitude. "We need to think about this." Kokong turned his cold face away, silently thinking about the other 2 individuals. One was the marshal, and the other was Tongung Suang, while he himself was just a subordinate officer, a military officer not allowed to speak. Hearing Lydium's eyes widen, displaying a supportive look for Dick Kokong, he thought to himself, how could this esteemed gentleman be so modest? He remembered back when he had just returned to camp and asked the esteemed gentleman to use his magic to save his fellow soldiers, in addition to hearing that the esteemed gentleman had voluntarily paid for the release of 10 prisoners of war. It was truly admirable. Hearing Lydium speak like that, Dick Kokong felt embarrassed, but secretly thought that perhaps this person hadn't realized his contributions. Lydium respectfully bowed, expressing gratitude for Dick Kokong's great kindness, thinking carefully that no one was more suitable than him. He hoped that Dick Kokong would convey his request to the marshal. Dick Kokong remained silent for a moment, somewhat hesitant. It wasn't because of Lydium's flattery, but rather because this matter only required him to speak to have merit, unlike that detestable Tongung Suang. Sensing the opportune moment, Lydium spoke again, saying that in fact, he had a deep affinity with the celestial martial arts. Then he recounted the story of coincidentally encountering a Taoist who taught him magic. The story was told in captivating detail, leaving Dick Kokong mesmerized. Dick Kokong was somewhat skeptical and asked Lydium to demonstrate the magic. Lydium aimed at a withered branch of peony in a vase and used the technique of Hon Kanfu Tru, embellishment of vitality. The withered branch immediately blossomed with fresh petals before Dick Kokong's eyes. Startled and horrified, Dick Kokong wondered how this enchantment could be performed without chanting any spells and without any signs of Longhoki, and how it could have nothing to do with Longhosen. This kind of magic, entirely independent of Longhoki, was truly crucial for Dick Kokong himself and his position in Longhosen. Later, Dick Kokong patted Lydium on the shoulder in a friendly manner and insisted that he drink with him, completely changing his attitude. Lydium also became Lyasud. Dick Kokong said he would take care of the matter for Lydium, and after 3 cups of wine, Dick Kokong casually asked about the shortcomings in Lydium's magical techniques according to his senior. They should exchange and supplement each other's magical charms. Lydium was astonished when the system announced that Dick Phu, a highly skilled practitioner from Longhosen, intended to exchange skills with him. After the exchange, one would lose their skills while gaining a specialized skill from Longhosen. Then the system displayed the exchange list. Lydium was overwhelmed by the long list and finally chose the skill Fuong Than Phu, Phoenix Divine Seal, feeling joyful to have found what he needed. He happily asked his senior about the mysterious aspect of the 6-9 Fuong Than Phu, 6-9 Phoenix divine seals, and they both understood each other's intentions. In the Ming military camp, Lin Hutong saw Dick Kaokong and Li Diem enter, feeling somewhat surprised. He thought to himself that Li Diem was young, but what he lacked in experience, he made up for with humility, which was highly praised by Dong Liu. Unlike Taming, if Li Diem had half the vision, he would have become a talented general rather than being left behind as a frontline soldier. Lin Hutong looked at Dick Kaokong and spoke coldly, asking straightforwardly what was the matter. Dick Kaokong confidently replied that he had come up with a way to help the marshal deal with the demons like Tongung Swang. He was pleased to have helped the Vo generals, despite having Long Oki by their side, as they still feared the demons. Even the generals themselves could not afford too many casualties to destroy the demons without any losses. The progress was becoming slow. Hearing this, Lin Hutong hurriedly asked Dick Kaokong if he had agreed to the plan to exterminate the demons. Dick Kaokong hesitated to speak and said hesitantly, "Actually, it's not just recently that the nation has declined, demons have arisen everywhere. It's the same in Triutian. Besides the fierce demons, there are also inferior forest deities in rural areas. I intend to have Lai Tongqi subdue the group of forest deities in Triutian based on the Ming alliance to suppress them and exterminate the demons. I believe that after restoration, the country will no longer be chaotic. The forest deities also understand this principle. If Triutian loses them, it will be difficult for them to survive. The external invader will have to work instead of being idle. That's Li Diem's plan. Whether it succeeds or fails, it can also be used as an excuse to arrange for Theitu to have the status of a native forest deity in Triutin. In Theitu's tent, she poured fiery wine into her mouth and reminded Li Diem of Kanashi's advice to abandon Lin Hutong's city. She was deeply moved. There wasn't much time left for her. Even if she truly followed a Ming army unit and infiltrated into the Triutian guerrilla unit 5 to assassinate Kanashi, it wouldn't be a simple task. However, there were still more than 8,000 soldiers. If he wanted to escape alone, as a small miracle commander, with only over 200 soldiers under his command, he would still be able to protect himself. The fear was that he wouldn't have the ability to participate in other events. Upon hearing this, Li Diem asked her if there was any other way. Theitu looked straight into Li Diem's eyes and said slowly, "I can help you kill her. Nixie can also help you in this Diem Phu event, increasing the awakening level of Ku.yu from 60% and above. Consider this as settling our past grudges. Are you considering it?" Li Diem hesitated to ask, "But don't you only have the power of a 10th grade rank?" Theitu didn't answer Li Diem's question, but instead asked in return, "Do you agree or not?" Li Diem, hearing something good like this, where the mission could be completed without fighting, was inclined to agree. Theitu, upon hearing this, raised her right hand and snapped her little finger off, then handed it to Li Diem. Li Diem swallowed nervously, looking at the severed finger in front of him. The system announced that the Theitu Chi force could only be absorbed through ingestion to increase the level of awakening by 50%. Simultaneously, when obtaining the Theitu Chi force, the level of awakening would automatically exceed 40% proficiency, achieving a reward of 40% proficiency. However, the Theitu Chi force had disappeared from the records of Nam Dien Phu, indicating that it couldn't resist random absorption, and its effectiveness couldn't be countered. Seeing Li Diem's hesitation, Theitu's expression saddened slightly as she said, "Some things from the past I didn't understand before, but now it's clear. Do you agree to eat or not?" After receiving Li Diem's rejection, she quietly reattached her finger. Li Diem pondered for a moment before saying, "For helping me deal with an opponent whom you deemed I couldn't handle, consider it repaying a debt of gratitude." Then Theitu nodded. At that moment, a lieutenant reported to Li Diem that the horses were ready, and everyone began their journey to the first destination Li Diem chose, Nipsan, surrounded by snow. Vuong Sin pointed his thumb towards a distant hill, agreeing that they had met Kobayako there last time. Li Diem scratched his head disappointedly, circling Nipsan for 2 hours without any sign of wild beasts, let alone Nipsanu. At that moment, the junior magician Afi took out a charm from his sleeve, which Li Diem accepted. It was a charm of the mountain guardian, Sun Chu. Afi activated the charm, causing it to disappear into the sky. Then, Afi angrily took out a third charm. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the air, a girl of 13 or 14 with black hair, wearing a white dress, and a fiery orange aura around her right hand. Afi pointed at the girl angrily, accusing her of stealing his talisman. At this moment, another woman in a green jacket appeared, calmly telling Afi not to be angry at her sister. She took Afi's side to protect him and didn't blame her sister. However, Afi insisted, saying she had to apologize for stealing his talisman, and the girl did. Then the woman turned to Diem, saying, "We meet again, Marshal." Diem stepped forward and bowed deeply to Nipsanu, addressing her as the Lord of Nipsan. Tomki Diem greeted Nipsanu with a smile, and she gracefully gestured, causing a wooden fence post to spring up from the ground. Shortly after, a rural house appeared in front of them. Inside, there was still an iron pot emitting a fragrant aroma. Nipsanu scooped out a bowl of hot soup and offered it to Diem, her radiant smile just like yesterday's. As Diem was about to take it, they two reached in and grabbed the bowl, saying she wanted to drink. Nipsanu's eyes shifted as she replied, "There's rice wine under the window, homemade. If you don't mind, try it." They two finished the soup, nodded in thanks to Nipsanu, and then turned away. At this moment, Diem composed himself and told Nipsanu about the assassination attempt he faced that day, grateful for her timely assistance. Nipsanu smiled, a hint of bitterness in her smile, probably because the top commander of Triushan would seal the letter again. She also felt unsure about what miraculous beings could do. "I'm just a spirit in the mountains," she said. "Why wouldn't we know? If Triushan's destiny perishes, we, like wandering spirits in the mountains, will also disperse." She placed the letter on the table and continued, "Since the emperor was expelled from the palace until now, I have known a lot, but relying on Nipsan to give birth to me is regrettable. However, I can't escape it in this lifetime. Nipsan's half-step doesn't really help the marshal. I've tied my hair while saying, I know there are some wild beasts or spirits in this area, either because the shrine was destroyed, or the souls below were killed. There's a plot to attack and kill Oka, which the marshal can gather. These people can be of use." Diem heard this with great joy, and immediately asked Nipsanu for more details. Nipsanu explained that there was a herd of buffalo-headed beasts in the west of the Songho village, whose caregivers had all been killed by Oka. Using this information, the marshal would have a harvest. While explaining, Nipsanu handed Diem a piece of green cloth. At that moment, the system announced a special Diem Phu event, the formation of a team consisting of soldiers of men and supernatural beasts. After formation, this team would have special status with 2 criteria: at least 1 leader of men with a power level of 10 or above, and all supernatural beasts must have a proficiency level of at least 10. Completing this Diem Phu event would increase the limit of purchasing power and grant a special reward. During this time, the black-haired girl in white clothes exchanged some words with Nipsanu. Diem asked if she was the spirit raised by the Dao thieves last time. Nipsanu remained silent for a moment before confirming her identity as Nanako, and explaining that she wanted to follow the marshal, seeking his approval. Diem glanced at Nanako and nodded. Nanako ran to Vuongsin, smiled at him, and then merged into his sword, causing amusement among the group. After leaving the makeshift house, the journey continued. When Nipsan's Chaon fort was turned into a house, Theitu was still standing there, holding 2 wine jars, staring at her. Diem urged her to wake up and continue. Theitu got up, mounted her horse, and muttered something about creating a special army of supernatural beings. Upon arriving at the Songho village, they found burnt and bloodied houses everywhere. In the midst of the desolate gardens was a large monstrous creature, the buffalo head, meditating. Diem observed the creature, which was over 3 million in size, covered in blood vessels, with golden leaves on its head and a budding shoot in the middle of its forehead. When the group approached, the creature roared at them to leave. Diem calmly introduced themselves as the celestial soldiers of Min, sent by the king to subdue them and expel the Japanese. The buffalo head swaged its hand, sending the decree flying. After examining it, the creature acknowledged Diem's courage, but commented that his rank was too low. Li Diem joked about wanting to meet someone of higher rank and suggested a fight to prove his worth. The buffalo head accepted the challenge, and they engaged in combat. Li Diem wielded his hone-long sword to deflect a blow aimed at his leg, then countered with a strike, leaving a scar over 5 meters long on the creature's thigh. The buffalo head fell to the ground, acknowledging Li Diem's strength. It explained that the officials in the capital were not always willing to fight and hinted at the complexities of their relationships. Li Diem, feigning indifference, remarked on the creature's attentiveness to court affairs. The buffalo head chuckled, revealing that they were bred and raised to race by humans and were well aware of court matters. Then, they continued their journey towards Shinjitai, the forest of Daong. As they approached, the sunset cast a red glow over the desolation of the land, with flocks of crows flying overhead. In front of them stood a tall tree, its branches laden with corpses, and the ground littered with human bones. Seeing this, Vong Sin broke into a cold sweat, preparing for battle. Suddenly, 3 feather-like objects flew straight towards the buffalo head. After a metallic clash, the feathers fell gently to the ground, and a cold female voice spoke, warning them not to disturb the peace. La Diu explained the situation to Toto, who revealed herself as the ambassador of Minquok. Despite this, Toto remained hostile. Afi attempted to intervene with magic, but the wind ceased and only a few leaves floated down. Then, a monstrous creature appeared, part bird legs and part beautiful woman with 9 pairs of wings. Li Diem dismounted and approached, holding his hone-long sword, while Toto warned him to stay back. But then, a drop of blood fell from somewhere onto Toto's face. In the blink of an eye, the image of Li Diem enlarged in Toto's eyes, a sense of dread from the pressure, blood rushing through Toto's body. In a trance, she saw the silhouette of a creature flying out from Li Diem. Li Diem, with black hair and white fur, a body with the head of a bird, and 18 pairs of wings closed. Suddenly, Toto fell from the sky, landing with a flushed face, looking at Li Diem. Sweat dripped from her small face to the ground, her eyes hazy and sparkling, the happy tone in her voice uncontrollable. Then she turned around. Li Diem excitedly gestured to Theitu, understanding immediately. "Follow me," she said to the next one. On the way, Toto clung to Li Diem, incessantly babbling, introducing the personalities and powers of the surrounding fairies. Then, looking at Li Diem with affection, Li Diem, sitting on her horse, looked displeased and uncomfortable, saying she had spoken enough for the journey. Toto fell silent, her eyes wide, looking at Li Diem with glowing affection. Li Diem secretly thought, comparing Toto to a zither's bridge. One is the deity of agriculture, worshipped, the other is the ancestral deity of Korea. The power of both cannot be underestimated. This is just the beginning. It's unknown how strong the fairy army will become after conquering it, caught between the Ming army and the Korean fairies. Inside Bin Huang Fortress, demons lay scattered in pools of blood. Tong Yi held the head of a tiger-headed spear, looking at 2 subordinates bowing their heads in gratitude without saying a word, then pulling his injured body away. The camp remained quiet and eerie. Generals sat chatting about plans for their return. At this moment, Tongdi, covered in blood, led the frontline soldiers wounded by his side, slowly walking towards a general who had a grudge against him. Seeing this, the general said harshly, and in response, Tongyi thrust a sharp spearhead into his throat. Tongyi stared fiercely like a wild beast, making him swallow his saliva and silently leave the tent. Tham Hak Angon asked, "Han, why did you come out?" Tongyi closed his eyes and said, "There is a powerful demon in the fortress, difficult to defeat." Tham Hak Ngan, annoyed, said, "If it's difficult to kill, then forget it. How many people in this camp dare to risk their lives to kill a demon?" Then he handed Tongyi a bottle of wine. "Isn't it faster to kill the enemy while drinking?" he said. "This is the last resort." Tongyi drank the wine without hesitation, but before he could swallow, he spewed out vinegar. "You're already married, why are you still acting like a child?" At this moment, Tham Hak Ngan handed Tongyi another bottle of wine. "People invite you to drink, but you don't. Are you waiting to drink vinegar?" "We've been comrades for 7 years," he continued. "Your temperament hasn't changed. Wait for me. Wait for me to recommend you, and I'll bear the burden of more than 7 years. Take a break today and heal your wounds, he finished. Then Tham Hak Ningon left the tent with his helmet. The two didn't know this was their last meeting. 10 miles from Shinjutai Fortress, Konishi Yukinaga's army was retreating rapidly. Lin Hutung's army had already blocked their retreat route. Outside Bin Huang Fortress, dust filled the air, and strange creatures appeared without end. Diem rode ahead, quickly reporting to the commander that the enemy's infantry had arrived. Finally, Diem's ferry coalition was fully assembled, ready to advance to the final battlefield at the Daong River. Just now, Diem hurriedly rode to the foot of Bin Huang Fortress, dismounted and loudly called for the commander, but was informed that the commander had already left, chasing Konishi Yukinaga towards the Daong River. Diem could only tell Lao Diu to wait outside the fortress, while she went to meet Tongdung Suong first, then decide. Tongdung Suong, upon hearing the news of the enemy's sudden appearance, quickly asked Diem where she got the news. Diem took out a bird from her person, which flapped its wings and spoke, "Divine grace, my lord." "Greetings, Archangel." Tongdung Suong asked coldly, "Did you see the enemy's divine grace in the Japanese army?" The little fairy replied, "The divine grace truly saw many flags, people and horses, fiery weapons." Tongdung Suong, hearing this, realized he couldn't get detailed information from this bird, lacking experience in warfare. At a glance, 10,000 people were the same as one person, all with dark heads, let alone a bird. Diem continued, "Sir, I asked carefully. In the Japanese army, there are at least 7 or 8 flags with distinguished flags, perhaps even Konishi himself. They may not be a great army, but they will be skilled. When the divine grace pays attention to them, roughly 200 miles south of Shinjutai Fortress, if the great army doesn't stop now, they'll probably be 10 miles from Shinjutai." Tongdung Suong nodded and then asked, "I heard that Dikt Cao Kong issued orders for you to concentrate the wild spirits of Korea. How effective is it?" Diem immediately replied with some achievements. Tongdung Suong narrowed his eyes, handed Diem his seal, and quickly ordered her to go to the Daong River to inform the commander. He'd also warned that they must plan for the long term and not be reckless. Holding the seal, Diem felt a warm flow into her body. The system announced, "The bearer of the National Seal of Minkwok receives 3 supplemental pills. You will receive Longhoki. As an addition, because you do not have the innate trust in Tiger Energy directly, so you can only receive the increased state basics. You will receive a 15% reduction in all types of injuries. The wounds you inflict will be accompanied by Longhoki, with the burning effect. The effect of the Imperial Transport and Longhoki counteract each other when the group outside the fortress joins the human army." Diem ordered Toto to fly to the Daong River to find the commander first. Toto heard and immediately suggested carrying Diem to search, but Diem declined. She flew away with a dejected look. Diem then turned back and loudly addressed the fairies, telling them all to follow her. The opportunity to establish a career and achieve glory has come. After the battle, our admiral will personally write a letter to the Emperor of Triuchin, requesting assistance in casting golden statues and building temples, she said, chuckling. "The generals of the Celestial Dynasty's upper court have spoken. We can certainly trust them." With that, Diem mounted her horse and led everyone towards the Daong River. Along the way, Feidu asked quietly, "You don't seem like a foolish person, but the situation at Diem Phu this time seems very dangerous for you. However, the rewards are extremely rich. If you were to report now that the rescue army from Okawa is coming, Lin Hutung would turn back to the fortress, and Konishi's commander would find it difficult to kill him. Now, Konishi's commander is in a precarious position, like a weak egg. This is the best opportunity. While you have considerable power in your hands, temporarily withholding information to sow discord, letting Lin Hutung and Konishi's commander battle it out, will be advantageous for you." Feitu said so, but in his heart, he thought that delaying the report would slow down the campaign and might even lead to Lin Hutung being besieged, resulting in failure in the war between Min and Triuchin. But it seemed that Diem didn't care about such matters, and there was no reason for her to care. Lin Hu Tung and Damon in this world had nothing to do with Diem. This man wasn't a fool, but he worked very cleanly and decisively. He dared to act and understand when to let go. Hong Kwai was far behind him. He knew what he needed to do. Diem shook her head, and Thaitu laughed coldly. As a man, Diem, you're quite indifferent, he said. The kings of this world have nothing to do with me, but I will handle it my way. Whether a person can see through the situation and distinguish between danger and benefit depends on their ability. But how to solve the situation, with fists or with brains, is a matter of character. There are thousands of tricks in the world, but only one trick from heaven. The cold wind blows. A thick layer of ice has formed on the Daong River. Kanishi Yukinada looked at the silent army behind him. In just a few days, the general Coto, whom Kanishi Yukinada trusted the most, had died in battle. 3 elite battalions armed with Itaken guns had suffered heavy losses, originally consisting of 17,000 soldiers, but now fewer than 8,000 remained. Kuroda looked at Kanishi Yukinada's dejected expression and tried to comfort him. Cheer up a bit, at least we're still alive, aren't we? Kanishi Yukinada turned back with a frustrated face and shouted loudly at the bewildered warriors behind him. Today we failed, but soon we'll be back. Although we failed today, we'll soon be back. We'll be back soon. Just as he was about to finish speaking, a series of gunshots rang out, and fiery flames erupted on the river's surface. Kuroda immediately understood and shouted for everyone to cross the river quickly. The Japanese army panicked and dispersed, losing their formation. They rushed back to the shore as artillery shells fell relentlessly into the river. The layer of ice on the river began to crack, and the Japanese soldiers, unprepared, fell into the freezing water. Seeing this, Kanishi Yukinada was so angry that he wanted to explode. He cursed the vile Min dynasty soldiers on the other side of the Daong River. On the other side of the Daong River, the commander of the Celestial Dynasty's divine mechanical forces, pointing at Kanishi Yukinada, shouted, "Kanishi is the one on top with 2 rabbit ears. Release the leader of the enemy with thousands of torches. Form up and light up the Daong River as bright as day." The Celestial Dynasty's army stood in formation on the bank, waiting for the final battle. Tham Hakngan, wearing heavy armor and holding a large flag, had a serious expression. Looking across the river, the captain of the artillery team from the western regions continued to command soldiers to deal with the Japanese reinforcements, trying to buy time for Kanishi Yukinada to escape. Facing death, he felt strangely comfortable, as if glory were just a cup of wine for 49 years, like a moment of living without knowing death. The years were like a dream. At this moment, Kuroda struck his helmet loudly. "You fool! Your men are using guns to shoot at the great cannons of the Ming dynasty," he shouted, ordering all soldiers to throw away their guns and take up swords and knives, charging forward. Seeing Kuroda take a deep breath, his eyes and mouth simultaneously turned pitch black. In the dark night, a giant black shadow appeared on the river's surface. The ice that Kuroda had turned into a dam on the river turned black and spread rapidly. The layer of ice had shattered, and now it was stable again. Thuong Chi was startled by this and shot a fire dragon arrow at Kuroda. Kuroda tilted his head to avoid it, then turned back to look at Thuong Chi. Smoke billowed from his eyes, making Thuong Chi fall from his horse, his eyes bleeding. Lak Thuong Chi thought to himself, fortunately, there was Long Hoki's protection, otherwise he would have died. Where did this monk get such strange power? At this moment, Kuroda's entire body emitted dense black smoke, making him look like a demon. Suddenly, a large shadow descended like a meteor. It was the bullhead leading the charge. The bullhead smashed into the large gate of the Min dynasty, killing Japanese soldiers while shouting orders. Under Tomki, Diem's command, chaos reigned. By the decree of the Triushan Emperor, the special envoy of the Min dynasty's admiral arrived to assist. Then, 3 snowballs fell into the river, sharp as thorns, tearing apart any horses they encountered, shredding them into pieces. A gust of wind, accompanied by sharp ice shards, swept through, lifting Japanese soldiers into the sky, their horrifying screams echoing across the Daong River. Toto, now appearing as a beautiful divine bird in the sky, under Tongki Ladim's command, was leading the charge. With the Triushan Emperor's decree and the special envoy of the Ming Dynasty's admiral's assistance, it seemed that countless rural deities had appeared to help. Lin Hutong looked down at the crimson Daong River and said, "This is undoubtedly a great victory. The question is whether we can defeat Konishi Yukinaga and wipe out the Japanese troops in the siege or not." Diem, standing beside Tongmem Swang's seal, reminded him of his strategic advice. "Sir, the wandering wolf may retreat, but the tiger leader must not lose hope. Sir, please think carefully before deciding." Lin Hutong's face was slightly gloomy. Tonggung Swang advised him to withdraw, but once the duck is cooked, how can it fly away? Then he ordered, "In Triushan territory, we have 800 officials. We should not fear difficulties in tracking down the enemy. You spoke of gratitude and virtue. Seeing Okao inside, real or fake, is unpredictable. This is the first point. Even if you say it's true that the rescue army from Okao is coming, when we attack Shinjutai, it's like yesterday's business. The rescue army cannot know about it. The closer they get to Shinjutai, the more cautious they will be, absolutely not daring to take risks. This is the second point. The divine army of more than 10,000 soldiers is in chaos, and the celestial soldiers are on duty. All of them are heading to defend the capital of Triudin, where the true enemy is. The battle at Nyok Tho, where Lithuanthan severed Okao's 2 supply lines, has left Okao's military supply in dire straits. How many troops can the rescue army from Okao have? Even if it's 8,000, we have 40,000 soldiers. This is the third point of my order. The order to the guerrilla general Thamhaknyan. Lead 4,000 elite troops to hunt down Konishi. Even if it's not successful, it must be for us." After speaking, he helped Lydium up and asked, "How is your army doing in recruitment?" Lydium replied, "The store is currently at the Daong River, wiping out the Japanese troops." Hearing this, Lin Hutong laughed loudly. "Then don't just sit idly by. Go across the Daong River and eliminate the Japanese immediately." Lydium turned her horse, holding her sword, and charged towards the Daong River. At this moment, Thamhaknyan crossed the river in pursuit of Konishi Yukinaga, determined not to let his army go. Kuroda wielded his long black sword, turning back to look at Thamhaknyan, his eyes filled with madness. Just one move cut the enemy general off his horse on Kuchao Island. Takagawa rides a black horse, looked at the black-haired girl in front of him with a leadership look. Girl bowing. "Please don't forget the Prime Minister's promise. Kuchao Island is ours." Having finished speaking, she set up the bamboo pole, floating on a wooden boat. "Follow the rushing river," a samurai behind Takagawa whispered. Because of Bin Huang's aid, he abandoned Kuchao Island. Is this Lord Heihachiro's decision? Takagawa looked expressionless. "Look at the rushing river ahead. Whether the entire Kuchao Island is still alive or not. That place collapsed a long time ago, and our country is over. You still don't understand. This war is our last hope." Horses whinnied. The wind and snow shook the mountains and forests. Lydium felt sad and rushed into the crowd. Nothing can stop it. Japanese muskets opened fire. Countless bullets were fired at the first ox on the herd, but left no trace. Leading the Kwang Tae group of 10 Japanese soldiers, they fell dead. Kim Thien stuck out his tongue and swept a man into his mouth to swallow. A series of steel shots headed straight towards Lydium. The umbrellas gently swayed behind the black storm that erupted. Several bullets passed through Lydium number. The rest disappeared in the storm. Dang Thien hung Vuong Sin. Rushing into the fire pulse team, they tore a hole. At this time, a general wearing red armor shouted towards Lydium, "Takagawa, are you daring to fight me?" Before Lydium could respond, the cavalry behind her fired a series of shots, turning the man into a hedgehog. Konishi Yukinaga led more than 3,000 soldiers to break the siege, but due to Kuroda's influence, the firepower was ineffective. Even Lak Tuongchi, under Konishi Yukinaga, led 3,000 soldiers across the Daong River. Tuongchi quickly ordered the frontline archers to sacrifice themselves and charge straight into the enemy formation. Konishi Yukinaga held back most of the Japanese troops, but suddenly, the sound of horse hooves came from behind. Tham Hakngan led 6,000 vanguard troops, riding furiously, and the Japanese soldiers fell when they encountered them. Tham Hakngan didn't say a word, urging his soldiers forward. At this moment, black smoke surrounded Kuroda's eyes. He looked grimly at Konishi Yukinaga. "We can't escape this pursuit. If this continues, we'll all die here." Konishi Yukinaga sighed, took off his armor, and whispered, "Let's split up and run. Whoever escapes is lucky." Kuroda stared deeply into the eyes of the old and cautious Konishi. Tham Hakngan wielded his formidable weapon at the forefront, waiting to see the enemy forces fleeing ahead. Suddenly, splitting into two wings, left and right, a bit regretfully, Tham Hakngan murmured, "If only we had Tongyi, each of us on one side, the Lao army would be solid. We'll have to order Vong Luong to lead half of our troops to pursue on the right, while I lead the rest to chase on the left." At that moment, Diem had just crossed the Great Daong River and encountered Konishi Yukinaga's forces engaging with Lak Tuongchai. Diem inquired of Lak Tuongchi about the whereabouts of the esteemed Konishi Yukinaga, to which Lak Tuongchi replied, "He has already fled, being pursued by Tham Hakngan." Diem looked at Ito Kenzero within the Japanese ranks with a disdainful smirk, considering them nothing more than bothersome ducks. He spurred his horse towards the iron-sworded crossroad, aiming straight for the enemy troops from behind. As Mu Da Tren Dan and Kim Thien charged in like two gods, their swords and spears pierced through the enemy ranks effortlessly, causing chaos among the Japanese soldiers. Meanwhile, a flock of benevolent birds swept across, turning all into mere rubble without leaving a trace of flesh. Seeing the enemy soldiers completely losing their will to fight, Ito Kenzero drew his black sasuke blade from behind, emitting an eerie black smoke. Suddenly, a red snowflake rolled to Diem's feet, expressing regret to Toto. "The general in armor hurt me so badly, I couldn't resist." Upon hearing this, Diem shouted to Toto to lead the troops and tear apart the enemy formation, leaving the armored giant for them to handle. Diem then urged his green horse straight towards Ito Kenzero, whose normal spear had been imbued with divine blood, emitting a sparkling red glow. Ito Kenzero yelled, swinging his sword down at Diem. Diem maneuvered his horse to evade, locking eyes with Ito Kenzero, momentarily disorienting the enemy's spirit. In that brief moment, Diem thrust forward, the blade piercing through Ito Kenzero's throat. Blood gushed down the blade as Diem took a deep breath and shouted, "The leader is dead. Surrender or be slain." The mountains echoed with Tham Hakngan's cheers as the Lao army surged forward, attacking the Japanese forces fiercely. As Diem led the charge, the system alert sounded, notifying him of the mission target, Konishi Yukinaga. Diem roared to Toto, commanding them to divide and pursue, with more soldiers heading to the left. Konishi Yukinaga, furious, had previously managed to escape the Ming cavalry behind him, but was unexpectedly intercepted by the Triusian forces from the side. With his escape route blocked and surrounded, Konishi Yukinaga had no choice but to raise his sword. However, behind him emerged a massive black scorpion, shocking everyone. Then, from the rear, there was a deafening explosion. Diem led his eerie and formidable troop straight into the midst of the Japanese allies, causing chaos and destruction. The Tongki Diem cavalry shocked the Japanese, bravely fighting off 10 of them at once. Kim Thien pierced through the red armored ranks, while Diem continued his assault. Despite facing fierce resistance from the Akatsuki troops, the weaker demons suffered casualties. Dang Thien Hung and Lao Diu were surrounded by the Akatsuki forces, engaged in a life-and-death struggle. Diem advanced towards Konishi Yukinaga, intent on striking him down with a single blow. However, his fatal strike was intercepted by Koshi, Konishi Yukinaga's chief lieutenant. Diem's fierce attack was met with resistance as Kaito-hyo, another general under Koshi, blocked his path. Suddenly, Kuroda appeared from behind, intending to assist Diem. But before Kuroda could act, a scorpion's tail unexpectedly struck the delicate hand of a girl, causing her to cry out in agony. Vuongxin felt anxious as he saw the clear sword in Kato Hyo's hand coming towards him, but he was knocked away. Seeing Vuongxin defenseless, a nearby enemy stabbed him straight in the abdomen. Vuongxin leaped off his horse, drew his bow, and shot an arrow into the face of the Japanese soldier. As he stooped to pick up his fallen sword, an Akatsuki member swung his blade directly at his head. A black scorpion's tail suddenly wrapped tightly around the leg of the Japanese soldier, shocking everyone. The Japanese soldier, in pain, was attacked mercilessly by a ferocious wolf, tearing apart his body. The bullet intended for Konishi Yukinaga was redirected to aid the critically injured Vuongxin. Diem, without hesitation, engaged Kaito Hyo and Kato Hyo. With one hand blocking Kaito Hyo and Kato Hyo, the other wielding a gun, he couldn't turn the barrel in time. He twisted his wrist, throwing the gun straight into Kaito Hyo's eye, creating an opening for Diem to roll and dodge, using both hands to vigorously swing his sword, pushing back the two fearsome opponents. After several rounds, Kaito Hyo and Kato Hyo were horrified to realize that this man was not only skilled but also ruthless and deadly. Their attacks had left Diem's arms numb, almost causing him to drop his weapon. Despite the relentless fighting, Kaito Hyo managed to restrain Diem for a moment. Suddenly, an unexpected event occurred. Diem's mount, under Kaito Hyo's control, seized the opportunity to bite Kaito Hyo's horse's neck, causing all three to be shocked by the unprecedented sight. The bloody-mouthed mount bit a chunk of flesh from Kaito Hyo's horse's neck. Kaito Hyo lost balance, and Diem immediately thrust his sword into his throat, blood spraying everywhere. Unable to avoid it, Kaito Hyo was pierced through the throat and died instantly, his red-eyed gaze filled with agony, as the shadow of a black scorpion became clear behind him. Diem twisted the blade, aiming for Kaito Hyo's neck, blood splattering everywhere as Kaito Hyo was pierced through, falling from his horse. Diem spat blood on the blade, his eyes wide open. Kaito Hyo is dead. Konishi Yukinaga sighed. My brother, Kaito Hyo, was the last line of defense. Yet, within a few rounds, this man had killed him. He clenched 50 swords tightly, watching as Diem approached. Diem was about to charge into the Akatsuki forces when suddenly, a bolt of blue-purple lightning, as large as an arm, flashed, illuminating the battlefield like daylight. Countless mounted warriors and foot soldiers emerged, Damon and Chinquak. Japanese reinforcements had arrived. Meanwhile, the Great Daong River flowed rapidly, filled with corpses. Suddenly, a hand emerged from under the water, gripping an iceberg, carrying Kuroda Ninenma to the shore. In his mouth, he held a live fish, which he swallowed whole. He glanced at his left leg, only to see the gruesome head of Tham Hakngan biting firmly onto it. Moments later, Kuroda burst into uncontrollable laughter, exhilarated by the feeling of surviving the disaster. Laughter echoed throughout the Great Daong River as the entire army of Tham Hakngan was annihilated. The general Tham Hakngan died tragically, his head still biting onto Kuroda's leg, his eyes frothing with a horrifying expression, displaying his unwillingness to accept defeat. At that moment, Japanese reinforcements arrived, led by renowned historical figures such as Honda Tadakatsu, Fujiwara Yoshimoto, Coto Kayoshi, and Konishi Yukinaga, along with numerous Japanese generals from afar. Seeing the enemy reinforcements, Diem Than instructed Diem, "We still have time to encircle them." But Diem stared intently at Konishi Yukinaga, "Close enough to strike. Is anyone willing to continue with me? Let's take down the enemy's top general." Diem charged straight into the enemy formation, followed closely by Diem Than, with no one backing down. They sighed but said nothing, also charging forward. Konishi Yukinaga quickly commanded the remaining Akatsuki forces to block both sides from engaging fiercely. Diem struck down an Akatsuki member, knowing he had to quickly eliminate Kuroda before encircling him. If the enemy forces converged, his own troops would surely perish. With combat experience, Diem exerted all his strength to throw the spear forcefully towards Konishi Yukinaga. Konishi evaded to the side, and Diem, standing tall on his horse with the long sword in hand, jumped up, taking advantage of Konishi's evasion. He swung the sword wildly, blood splattering everywhere as he ruthlessly chopped off Konishi Yukinaga's head, which fell to the ground. Diem kicked the head towards Thaitu. Quick-witted, Thaitu caught it, turning his horse and shouting loudly, "General Konishi Yukinaga is dead here." The Japanese soldiers couldn't believe it and panicked, their fighting spirit vanishing. Seizing the opportunity, Diem jumped onto his horse and shouted to his brothers, "Kill and return. Back to our battlefield." Kuroda, seeing Konishi killed, enraged, charged towards Thaitu, swinging his sword. Diem turned his horse to intercept the blow, engaging in a fierce battle with Kuroda for several rounds. Knowing he shouldn't waste time, Diem pushed back Kuroda with all his might. Drawing back his sword, he activated the bloodthirsty Hon Kiem. The sword pierced straight through Kuroda's chest, with another person rushing over. All that could be seen was Diem, wielding the sword in his left hand and the spear in his right, firmly on his horse, his red-eyed gaze like that of a demon, terrifying his opponent to the point of dizziness. Under the pressure of his momentum, the opponent fell off his horse, scrambling to get up and retreat. At this moment, Thaitu and everyone stopped, looking towards the Japanese commander, only to see a figure clad in black armor wielding a long blue blade, the blade emanating a cold aura. This was the #1 martial artist of Chinquak, Honda Tadakatsu, with a sword in hand, one of the 3 famous swords of Japan, Than Diem Than, capable of cutting through anything. Than Diem Than was flying, hence the name. Diem knew that this might be the strongest opponent he had ever faced, especially wielding the Than Diem Than. Facing Honda Tadakatsu, Diem could only evade and block, trying to buy time for everyone else. Seeing Dang Thien Hung standing still, Diem growled for him to quickly lead the retreat. Honda Tadakatsu, seeing Diem fighting him while also caring for others, became furious, swinging his Than Diem Than down. Diem used his weapon to block in front of him, but the iron blade broke into pieces from just a few strikes. Honda Tadakatsu roared, thrusting straight into Diem's chest, shattering his breastplate. As Diem was about to fall from his horse, he threw a grenade. Seeing the grenade flying towards him, Honda Tadakatsu flinched, but it was too late. The grenade exploded with a deafening roar, smoke billowing up. Thaitu hugged the unconscious Diem and jumped onto the horse, signaling for everyone to retreat quickly. At this moment, a large number of Japanese cavalry chased after them from behind.